welcome into Foxborough Rush. If you love this show, you want to check out Hold My Banner on Nesson as well. Ante Campbell and I go around the league, including in-depth coverage of your Celtics, of course. Hold My Banner can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else podcasts are found. What a rush. Welcome into Foxborough Rush. Travis Thomas here with my man. S-Meezy is what I call him. Sean McGuire, how you doing, brother?
I'm great, Travis. How are you? Tough day for the Commanders. How are you doing over there?
I'm fine. Everyone back home's pretty upset. I mean, half of my family are Ravens fans. Then the other half of my family are Commanders fans. So it's been a rough playoffs for them. But meanwhile, I'm like, listen, I mean, at least your teams were in the postseason. I'm up here, up north, covering a team that hasn't even sniffed the playoffs with the way they played this season. Although I will say this, you know, talking to people from around here, Sean, a lot of nostalgia, a lot of remember when the Patriots were in AFC title games. I'm sure you know that feeling as well, my man.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago, but it does feel like a lifetime ago at this point. I mean, it's only 2018. What's that? 7 years?
Yes. So. Yeah, I know. It does. You're right. It feels like a long time ago. And look, the road for this team to get back to these kind of games, AFC title games, Super Bowls, and such, at least now appears to be more clear, right? You have Mike Vrabel at the helm. Of course, he caught up with Steve Burton on WBZ, Patriots Gameday. And look, we're going to get into some of these quotes, some of the sound from this interview. But, Sean, I'm sure you saw it. I mean, he talked about everything, a wide variety of topics. So let's just get into it here. This was Mike Vrabel on Josh McDaniels. So we know, obviously, McDaniels' history with the Patriots. You and I have spoke about this at great lengths before they hired McDaniels. So let's hear Vrabel on McDaniels, and then you and I will react after. Here we go.
Well, I mean, when you talk about Josh, I just think that schematically, the way that he teaches the quarterback, the versatility in the offense, you know, the base foundation of the offense, his growth, I think, in that offense, you know, trying to put conflict on the defense and the way that he structures a game plan, the way that he calls a game plan, having gone against them and having seen the system here as a player. Right. And it's evolved. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. And I know that he's, you know, in our conversations, worked hard and has studied and visited and met with people that, you know, we're going to continue to add things that we feel like help our players and give us an advantage to score touchdowns and take care of the football. Okay,
so look, you nor I were surprised at the hiring of Josh McDaniels. I think it was pretty much the worst-kept secret around town that was the way this team was going to go, and that Vrabel and McDaniels, although, you know, McDaniels was never an offensive coordinator for Braves. Obviously, they have a great connection from back when Vrabel played here. Sort of your initial reaction when it was official, because I don't think I've talked to you since. And when you hear comments like this, I mean, listen, I'm excited to see Josh McDaniels and Drake Maye work together, obviously. I think that's something that's going to only benefit and add to Drake Maye's development, Sean.
Yeah, I agree. And so just, I would say, initial reaction, I would agree with you. Kind of the worst kept secret, like you said, and just the writing was on the wall that it was going to be this way. I do want to make note of, because definitely since the last time I was on here, Adam Schefter came out, and I guess, you know, this is one of those things where you take it for what it's worth, but Schefter came out and said that this was a Mike Vrabel hire. You know, this was not a Patriots ownership. This was not a Robert Kraft hire. This was a Mike Vrabel hire. And again, take that for what it's worth, I guess. But I do think that some of the confidence and some of the things that Vrabel expressed to Steve Burton, I think kind of shows you that he is confident in McDaniels. He talks about the versatility of scheme and, you know, the ability to kind of do all that sort of stuff. And I think that goes a long way. So I just, to answer that question, I would say that it's definitely noteworthy, because I do think like there was something there that it's just essentially it's Vrabel coming across and, you know, expressing his confidence and his excitement when it comes to McDaniels.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I've said this. I think McDaniels being in charge of the offense, calling the plays here, developing Drake Maye, I actually think it takes some pressure off of Mike Vrabel. I want to see what I keep telling George is I want to see the CEO, Mike Vrabel.
Yep.
I want him, obviously, and we'll get into, Terrell Williams, the defensive coordinator as well, because he spoke on him. But I just think because Terrell Williams is a disciple of Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels is someone he's familiar with. We all really know what to expect offensively from Josh McDaniels. I think it gives Mike Vrabel an opportunity to sort of be an overseer, to kind of have a bird's eye view of things. And I actually think that's where the best Mike Vrabel will come forward, because I don't want him, not saying he's inept, but I don't want him too hands-on with my offense. That's not really his side of the ball. And if he's spending too much time on his side of the ball defensively, then that takes away from the overseer that I want to see. Would you agree with that assessment as well, that Josh McDaniels is a real advantage because of not only his experience, Sean, but I don't think anyone's going to beat down the door for Josh McDaniels to be their head coach anytime soon?
No, and I've been saying that for a few weeks too. I think that was I called it the biggest advantage. I think the biggest advantage that McDaniels brought was the fact that no team is going to try to hire him right away. But just back to your question, yeah, I agree that having McDaniels should help Vrabel in the fact that it allows him to be that overseer, as you called it. And I think what made Vrabel so good during his time in Tennessee was like a lot of the game management, the game, that sort of stuff, whether it comes to, timeouts or clock management or those sorts of things. And I think Vrabel being able to not have, not need to have both hands on the offense or, a lot of say in the offense allows him to kind of sit back and take advantage of what might be his biggest advantage in being that game management sort of stuff. I also think I think Terrell Williams is going to make a lot of sense, but when it comes down to it, I'm very confident in the defense because it's going to be Mike Vrabel. It's going to be Mike Vrabel who is overseeing that operation, that side of the ball. So I just think a lot of his time will be able to be spent on the defense. And like I said earlier, that game management sort of stuff with having Josh McDaniels kind of leading the offense. And I know Josh McDaniels isn't right now, he's not considered the quarterback's coach. When it comes to that, they hired a different quarterback's coach, but it's going to be all McDaniels when it comes to that stuff too.
Yeah, that brings me perfectly to my next question to you, which was, how do you sort of see? Yeah, it was fantastic. You're a pro's pro. You know what I mean? You're the pro's favorite pro. But I just wonder, McDaniels in terms of developing Drake Maye specifically, because I remember going back to draft night, the knock on Drake Maye. Well, his footwork is a little choppy. He's kind of raw there. His fundamentals aren't as tight as you would like. He's going to need development. He's going to need time. He's going to all these things. And kudos to the prior staff that was here with Drake Maye. I thought they did a pretty good job with him. But I think the kid deserves a lot of credit, too, for working on those weaknesses in his game. And then, sure enough, now you get a McDaniels in there. We saw Drake Maye clean those things up. I don't think footwork was an issue this season. I don't think fundamentals were an issue this season. There were times, there were lapses. Sure, maybe a couple of these turnovers, it could have been some fundamentals there that slipped through the cracks. But I think for the most part, we saw a more polished Drake Maye than maybe any of us, myself included, was anticipating. I didn't care, if you remember, Sean, about the rawness. I wanted him in a lot of ways to just grow on the field, learn on the fly, baptism by fire. And I think he was further along in the process than even I anticipated. So now with a Josh McDaniels, what I expect to see is some refinement here. Okay, let's start really getting into the weeds, getting into the best quarterbacks in this league, dual threat or not, by the way. The best ones in the league can stand in the pocket and deliver that football death by 1,000 cuts. Take what the defense gives you. Don't need the big splashy plays where you're taking the turnover risk, every play. Take what the defense gives you. Sometimes it's dink and dunk. Sometimes it's intermediate. Sometimes you do, have the ability to take the top off of the defense. So I want to see sort of the evolution, Sean, of Drake Maye. I want to see the refinement, and I think Josh McDaniels is a guy to do it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think so. And a lot of like when McDaniels was hired, or leading up to when he was hired, a lot of it was like kind of a boring, lackluster sort of thing. But when you really take a step back, there's no offensive coordinator, there's no one on the open market that has developed quarterbacks to the same extent that Josh McDaniels has. And I think that's what makes him the best person for the job. And I certainly, I think it's fair to say that Vrabel probably feels the same way. And it just, we have decades of resume to go through at this point with, when Josh McDaniels, I'm not going to give him a ton of credit, or I'm not going to give him all the credit for developing Tom Brady. But, you go to the Jimmy Garoppolo years and the Jacoby Brissett and Castle and, Matt Castle. And, then more recently you're talking about Mac Jones. And so his development when it comes to quarterbacks, I mean, Jimmy G was like fine coming out of college, but it wasn't like, it certainly wasn't expected that he was going to go and be a starter for, the 49ers within, however many years. Yeah. And same thing with Mac Jones. Mac Jones came in, pretty polished when it came to his intelligence and IQ, but I certainly don't think anyone thought that he was going to have the rookie season that he did. And I think there's a lot to be said that, Josh McDaniels is really good at developing quarterbacks, and, he has that experience. He has that resume. So I certainly would think that Drake Maye is pretty excited, I guess, to have Josh McDaniels be the one that he's learning from.
Yeah, one thing I'm curious to get your thoughts on as it pertains to McDaniels now is, do you think he'll need to adjust in terms of going for it on fourth down? Now, I don't really know his history. I'm going to assume that he's not like every other damn offensive coordinator and coach in this league, because forget the Super Bowl for a second. I know that's what everyone's talking about, Sean, but if you just look at the final four teams, the teams in the AFC and the NFC title games this past weekend, I mean, my God, was there a punt at all? Did it not feel like every fourth down these teams are going for it? We saw the Lions do it, Sean, all year. So I just some of me wonders, is Josh McDaniels going to have to adjust a bit and maybe be more aggressive than the last time he was an offensive coordinator? Is that nuts, or is that a fair sort of something I want to see, a fair question?
Yeah, no, I think it is fair, and I'm glad that you kind of just said this too. I think it comes down to like aggressiveness, overall aggressiveness, as opposed to just going for it on 4th and 4, 4th and 2, that sort of thing. I think it's just overall aggressiveness, and I think having a quarterback like Drake Maye, a dual threat, and as you said, we saw it a ton just now in the Commanders and Eagles game. I mean, the Commanders went for it like 3 times on fourth down on just their opening drive, and you see Jalen Daniels do a little bit of everything. I mean, he completed with his arm, he converted with his legs, and it's just like, it's almost as you're watching that game, through a Patriots perspective, you're thinking, okay, these are the things that Drake Maye should be, that the Patriots should be helping Drake Maye accomplish next year. So I definitely don't think it's an unfair question. I think it's, probably yet to be seen, obviously, on if he will do that. But I think it just comes down to an overall aggressiveness. And I think based on the quarterback you have, and, McDaniels knows the quarterback he has, I think it's fair to think that they're going to be a little bit more aggressive next year. And I almost just ended that statement without even talking about Vrabel. I mean, Vrabel we saw that a ton, about his aggressiveness during his time in Tennessee. So he is an aggressive coach that will go for it in aggressive situations. So I think it's fair to think that the Patriots will be more aggressive next year.
If you're enjoying the show, be sure to check out today's episode of Nesson's Daily Sports Podcast. Boston has entered the chat. We cover all things Boston sports, as well as trending sports topics from around the country. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Twitch, and wherever else you get your podcast. I'll tell you one damn thing. Aggression is one thing, but I am looking forward to creativity in the play calling.
Yes.
I mean, I can't – I think I lost my voice with how much I was screaming every single game at the television. Can I get some creativity, AVP, please, in this play calling? And it was so damn vanilla. And I understand not having a ton of talent. I do get it. I mean, that cupboard outside of Drake Maye offensively is pretty bare, okay?
Yep.
But sometimes I almost think a lack of talent forces really good play callers to be more creative.
Oh, definitely. Yep.
Right? You almost scheme guys open. You there's more trickeration in the playbook. You're going deeper in your bag in terms of an offensive play caller. So, I look at Josh McDaniels. One thing you can say about all his offenses, there is creativity there, Sean. And my goodness gracious, does this team need that in the worst way? By the way, I'm assuming like the rest of us and yourself, I'm going to put words in your mouth here, that this offense is going to be more talented next season.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have more players to sort of lean on other than just Drake Maye at the quarterback position. So hopefully he has some weapons that he can feed it to. But I'm looking forward to that creativity that this team was lacking big time, S. Mizzle.
Yeah, I mean, they can't be less talented, right?
No,
that's a pretty easy way to look at it. But yeah, I agree. I mean, when it comes to McDaniels, I think he's proven the ability to be creative and kind of be complex in a lot of things that he does. But I think we'll see a much better offensive game plan week after week, and a much better offensive product week after week.
No doubt. All right, so now Vrabel answered a handful of questions about the staff hires he's made. Again, Steve Burton talked to him on WBZ, Patriots Gameday. Here's a quote on Terrell Williams. He said, quote, "I've seen him meet and visit and have a connection with offensive linemen, so much so I was excited to make him the interim head coach for a preseason game. He had earned that opportunity. I thought it was something that was important for me to do, to reward those coaches that have earned that right. That is something he had earned at the time, just like he's earned this opportunity to be the defensive coordinator." So nothing shocking there from Vrabel, right? It's all about hard work, sort of earning your stripes, earning your keep. This is a guy in Terrell Williams who's been around the game a long time. He, as I call him, a Vrabel disciple. He's got it out of the mud. He's here now. And I have a lot of faith that he'll do a great job defensively calling these plays. And also, Sean, sort of what we just talked about with the offense, I believe this defense will be healthier. We'll also have some additional weapons defensively as well. So the combo, I sort of look at this as a combo. Josh McDaniels is kind of a standalone working with a Mike Vrabel. Terrell Williams feels like a combo platter with Vrabel because they're one and the same. I think defensively, this team, who's in the bottom half of the league defensively, hell, Esmeezy, if you can get me to half, just get me to the middle of the pack defensively, I think you're going to win more games next season. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And I think the hire makes a lot of sense. I mean, I wouldn't say like Terrell Williams wasn't one that, jumped out on me or, anything like that when it came to name recognition before he was hired. But, just doing a little bit of research into it and hearing, what people, analysts and that sort of thing are saying around the league, I think it does make a lot of sense. And it seems like, and again, I'll say this, that, Vrabel is promoting someone that he feels like, earned a promotion, deserved a promotion. Yeah. And at the same, that's great. At the same time, I'm confident that, if something goes wrong, I mean, the Patriots just had a first-year defensive coordinator who was also a defensive line coach, and we saw Gerard Mayo really not do anything to help him, and didn't step in when it came to play calling. Didn't really do a ton to help DeMarcus Covington. I don't see it playing out like that. If Terrell Williams has a little bit of trouble early, when he, again, first year as a defensive coordinator, if he has some issues early, I think Vrabel is going to be, the helping hand when it comes to that. So I think there should be a lot of confidence because, again, I just think like Vrabel will be overseeing the defense, maybe not calling it on a game-by-game sort of basis, but I think overseeing it is a fair way to put it. And I also said, and I think I said this to George, I like the hire a lot because he's worked with defensive linemen.
Yes.
So the Patriots have, Christian Barmore, Keon White, obviously Devon Gottschall is, a little bit older than those guys, but they have defensive linemen that really could use some development. The guys have talent, no doubt about that. Keon White has talent, but I don't think we saw as much of a second-year leap as maybe we expected entering the year. And I think a lot of that had to come back to coaching. So, I just, when it comes down to that thing, again, Barmore and Keon White, two of the Patriots up-and-coming young players, now having a defensive lineman or a defensive coordinator come in who's as familiar with defensive line play, I think should really help that group.
I couldn't agree more. He may have a new toy to tinker with in Abdul Carter, too. I mean, we keep talking about he could be drafted here. So that's someone, Terrell Williams, on that line that you're talking about, Sean, could come in and you just add him to the list of young guys who will get developed here under Vrabel and Williams. And that should be a pretty good group, all things considered. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you still have Drake Maye on a rookie deal. So even looking down the line 2-3 years, I mean, you start to have these defensive linemen coming to their prime together at the same time. Boy, you could be cooking with grease on the defensive side. I'll tell you another thing, too, sort of observation from the weekend that was in football. I mean, a lot of these teams have dominant defensive lines, none better than the Eagles. And all those guys were drafted and developed by the Eagles. So the Patriots have a real opportunity here if they go in that Abdul Carter route for the draft. You and I are going to be talking about the draft till we're blue in the face. They have a real opportunity to build something special on the defensive line led by Terrell Williams. Now, Vrabel went on. He even gave a quote on the special teams coordinator, Jeremy, don't call me Jerry Springer. Here it is. I like the dynamic in there. I know Tom. He was with us in Tennessee. Veteran coach who had it done. Jeremy is young, exciting, and a great teacher. He's creative. I think through the interview process and the product they had on the field, it led me to believe to lead that decision. It led me to that decision. So great move there, bringing in Springer. Look, I think special teams and defense go hand in hand. You and I talked about how this Patriots team had a lack of talent, offensively especially. But even with that and all the injuries and the drama with Peppers, they had some issues defensively as well. But I will say this. I mean, it was rare to see this Patriots team get blown out. A couple games they did. But for the most part, they were in all these games. So as I think improving defense, improving offense, the special teams is the cherry on top. I mean, if you can get your special teams and your defense tightened up and just don't turn the ball over offensively, you're going to win a lot of games in this league. You have to be – nowadays, you have to be a little more dynamic to win a Super Bowl for sure. But you can win a ton of games with that old formula of don't turn the ball over, play solid defense, and be great on special teams. Hey, you could still win in this league, Sean, in 2025.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention how Vrabel noted Jeremy Springer's energetic and energy, because he definitely provided it. I mean, that was one thing that was very clear from the first time I saw him on the practice field, was just, and you have to do it. I mean, that's what special teams is, right? But just to see the energy that he provided, I think is noteworthy. And he was a coordinator of the best position group that the Patriots had, right? I mean, the special teams was their best group, and Jeremy Springer was at the helm of it. So I think it makes a lot of sense to retain him. I think, again, just the energy. And let's not also discount when Jelani Tavai made the comments that kind of irritated some Patriots fans and everything like that, essentially telling Patriots fans to know their role. Mm-hmm. Jeremy Springer went to the podium and said, almost the exact opposite. Said, these fans pay a lot of money, to come watch us play, and we need to put out a better product. So not only does he provide the energy when it comes to that, but he certainly has the right way of looking at things as well. So just overall, I think Jeremy Springer made a lot of sense to stay, especially, again, as noted, just the fact that Vrabel has, there's some ties there when it comes to Tom Quinn, and Jeremy Springer, Tom Quinn being under Jeremy Springer and having worked for Vrabel in the past. So all things kind of considered, I just think it made a lot of sense to keep him.
Well, Vrabes didn't stop there. He told Steve Burton he was excited to work with Drake Maye as well. Let's listen to that sound.
Exciting, talented, ready to learn, ready to continue to develop, athletic, mobile, right. The ability to make throws at all part of the field, arm talent. But every year is a new process, and again, there'll be some new terminology. There'll be some carryover from what he's had, and I know that he's ready to learn. He's excited, and we welcome that and want him to lead our football team.
All right, Esmizzle, you know how I am. I'm overreactive. So let's just get into what everyone loves. Player comps, ceilings. What are we talking about with Drake Maye here? I mean, you and I just laid out what we think the offense will look like with Josh McDaniels. You hear Vrabel there, given all the attributes that we already know. Strong arm, dual threat, athletic, smart, tough. We get it. And we understand. Offensive line, needed. Weapons, needed. But let's just say, let's play this out a little bit. How good can this kid be if the Patriots check all those boxes and surround him with what he needs? They get him a real bona fide number one. They get him an offensive line that can keep him off his arse. I mean, how good can this guy be, do you think? Give me a comp and sort of his ceiling.
I mean, I think you got to go with the one that's been mentioned for, coming up on a year now, and that's Josh Allen, who's, currently trailing the Chiefs. I just think I heard someone describe him as like playing like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert's kind of physique or body type. And I thought that was a really interesting way to describe it, because obviously he doesn't have the size that Josh Allen does. Josh Allen's a big boy, but he plays with that sort of tenacity and, toughness and kind of mental makeup, I guess, if you want to throw out all the cliches. So I think if you're looking at ceiling, I think Josh Allen's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, I'm going to give you one that's in his class. It's a peer of his. I think it's Jaden Daniels. Okay. Remember, Caleb Williams was really the consensus number one overall pick, and that's why he went there to the Bears. But then the debate was Jaden Daniels or Drake Maye. And Lord knows after the rookie season, the debate's over because Jaden Daniels is the truth. But I think Drake has a lot more Jaden Daniels in him than he does Caleb Williams. Caleb tends to hold the ball too long, play hero ball. Hey, sometimes you're a hero, but sometimes you can be a zero when you get into that too. Whereas Drake is a lot more like Jaden in that he's cool, calm, collected, doesn't get panicked, big moments. Now, we haven't seen him on the big stages because, how many primetime games are you going to get right now? So we'll see. But it does seem as though when Shaq hits the fan, Drake stays pretty chill, makes the throws from the pocket, can get outside. A dual threat guy, but much more of a pocket guy than I thought. I thought he was going to be running a lot more than he did. I saw him run a lot at UNC, and maybe with McDaniels he will. But I see a lot of Jaden Daniels in Drake Maye. What do you say to that comp?
Yeah, I like it. I don't hate it. I would say certainly in 2024, Jaden Daniels and Drake Maye were not much of a comp. If you're going to ask me in 5 or 10 years, though, I don't know if that's going to be the case. I mean, I think you're kind of selling Drake Maye short if right now you just look at his rookie season. And, if you look at their rookie seasons, I should say, because Jaden Daniels was historic and Drake Maye's was, I don't know, average, I guess you want to call it average. So at some point, those are going to kind of middle out or find its level. And I wouldn't be totally surprised if that comparison is a lot closer in 5 years and 10 years.
If you're enjoying the show, be sure to check out Foxborough Rush every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for all things Patriots football. Mike Vrabel's staff has taken shape. The Patriots are picking 4th overall in the draft. Lots going on with the Pats. So the offseason's heating up. Roll with us. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Twitch, and wherever else you get your podcast. All right, here we go. Josh McDaniels, what has he been up to the past year? That's what we want to know. Well, this is what he said. This is from the Patriots. They tweeted over the weekend, there's just an evolution to our game that I think is important that you need to respect. This year has given me an opportunity to really consider all aspects of what this job entails. I'm excited about what we're going to build here and the evolution of our offensive scheme, our offensive attitude, the things we do, how we practice, and ultimately the way we go about playing. he used evolution a bunch of times there, S. Mizzle, and I love to hear it because that's exactly what I want to see from this offense. Evolution, because you got nowhere to go but up. Because, my God, they were rock bottom last year. So thank God he's coming in with evolution in mind. I mean, I need him to be Charles S. Darwin for this offense, S. Mizzle.
Yeah, and so before the Patriots released that video of Josh McDaniels, it was reported in a few places too. I know Albert Breer talked about it. Greg Bedard, I believe, had it too. And one of the quotes that Breer had that really stuck out to me was essentially it was about McDaniels and how he was essentially turning a pretty complex offense. You know, obviously we Patriots fans, we saw that during his first 19 years with the Patriots, but he was essentially turning a complex offense into what Breer called more user-friendly. And I think that term really kind of stuck out to me. And it just, to me, it's a great thing, right? I mean, and I wrote about this last week. I mean, one of the biggest criticisms of McDaniels, you know, during his, previous 2 decades with the team was a lot of his offenses were pretty complex. And so it made it difficult on younger players. And it really came back to, it was even a criticism to why the Patriots couldn't draft and develop receivers because, you know, essentially McDaniels' systems were just so complex that those players couldn't catch on. Obviously, you know, guys like Tom Brady and, you know, Julian Edelman and those sorts of guys didn't have as much of a problem with it. But, you know, N'Keal Harry, for example, you know, he certainly did. So I just think to hear McDaniels talk about, you know, evolving and all that sort of thing as well, you know, and to hear this Breer comment calling it user-friendly, I just think that really sticks out. And I think it really could be a big, you know, a pretty pivotal change for the Patriots if he brings in, you know, new schemes and new terminology, I guess, that's kind of easier to understand for a lot of these young guys because the Patriots are a young team. I mean, there's, they got two receivers going into their second year. Pop Douglas is going into his third. I mean, they have a lot of young players as well as the offensive linemen. So I just think, you know, hearing that user-friendly term or more user-friendly, I think that's a great thing.
Well, Josh McDaniels actually talked about, as you call user-friendly, talked about that as it pertains to young talent before he even got the gig. He was on Games with Names with our old pal Julian Edelman and talking about how you develop young talent, particularly at that quarterback position. And this is fascinating stuff. Again, remember, this was before he got the gig. Listen to how he's describing how you develop a young quarterback.
I think you have to have a plan, you know, and that obviously starts from the head coach, his perspective, and you have to, you know, be able to agree on how you're going to kind of unveil that thing to the player and, you know, and ultimately bring him along. You know, you were a young player that needed to make progress every step of the way.
Yeah.
And this is no different. It's just there's so much notoriety and so much attention on the quarterback position. So if they're not talking about your arm angle, they're talking about your footwork. If they're not talking about that, they're talking about your eyes or your read or how you navigated the pocket. And there's a lot of things that go into playing it well. But I at the end of the day, I think you got to take the player where he's at, you know, when he comes in, whether that was Castle or Garoppolo or Stidham or Brissett or Mack, Aiden O'Connell. Like, you got to take the player where he's at. They're all at different spots. They all have been taught different things. They've all, digested different amounts of information. Some have played in different systems than yours. Some have played in maybe some that were a little bit more like yours. And you just got to figure out, all right, what do they know? And what am I going to try to, you know, push forward to get him to progress the quickest?
Yeah.
You know, I think I can get this and this done in OTAs. Okay, great. Cadence, play calls, footwork. All right, good. Then in training camp, you know, now I got to get him to see different coverages and understand defenses a little bit more.
And protection.
You know, protections, you know, and then, you know, move forward, you know, ball security. And then the red zone's a different animal and third down and 2-minute offense. So there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think it's just having a really good feel for where's the player at.
Yeah.
You know, can't just keep throwing stuff at him. I always talk about it. They have a bucket. You guys all had a bucket. And yours was a big bucket at the end. Like, you could handle whatever we gave you. Well, when you take a young quarterback, it's more like a cup. You know, you got to put some stuff in his cup, and when it gets to the top, you got to stop. You know what I mean? And then make sure that he, has this and he can do it well. And then, okay, so then when he's ready for more, then you get him a bigger cup.
Yeah.
And then hopefully he ends up with a bucket and you got a bunch of stuff in there that you can do well. But there's no shortcut. There's no shortcut to it. And I think knowing where the player's at is really important.
Smeezy, this is great news because Drake Maye is such a worker bee. He's obsessed with the game. Certainly not comparing him to Brady, but we see what hard work does at that quarterback position. Brady had that work ethic. I believe Drake Maye has an insane work ethic as well. And I watched him as the season went on with a lack of talent, with just the most vanilla play calling you could ever see. He still got better every week. Still. I mean, that I never gave credit to the coaches for that. I gave credit to Drake Maye, and I think the coaches didn't blow it with that. So that tells me, with hearing McDaniels talk about this, not even knowing he was going to be working with the Drake Maye, but just him talking about developing a young quarterback and how they have cups of knowledge, not buckets. You want to turn it into a bucket eventually. Hell, I think Drake Maye's ready for a bucket. Now, he's got work to do, but will he be attached to the hip to Josh McDaniels the same way Tom Brady was? I believe that answer is yes, S. Mizzle. So I am extremely optimistic that Drake Maye, from rookie year with absolute morons as coaches to year 2 being well coached in his work ethic and his abilities and God-given gifts, I think he's going to take a monstrous leap.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I just, the way that McDaniels just laid it out on that podcast, I think is just such a good way of looking at it, right? Like, you're not putting everyone into one category. So, a guy who's been in the league for 10 years isn't getting, all the same sort of stuff put on his plate as a guy who's been in the league for 2. I think that's really good. And, that's how the Patriots, and that's how the Patriots coaches should be operating. So I would agree. I think, if we want to stick to buckets and cups comparisons, I would say Drake Maye at this point is probably going to go into year 2 and he'll have a pitcher, right? It's, what's that, 5 cups, I think, when you're talking about beer, I guess, depending on the beer. But I would say it's going to be something like that. And, eventually, whether it's the year after that or, year 3, year 4, I certainly could see Drake Maye with that sort of bucket, comparison.
Jesus, dude. Now you got me thinking about beer, man. What are we doing here, Smeezy? What are you trying to do to me, bro?
I think there was Natty Lights pitchers in college that were 5 cups. So.
Hey, we've come a long way from Natty Lights. I'm such a beer snob now. Not that this is the greatest beer ever, but you know what I love? I'm a big Allagash guy. You like Allagash White?
I do like Allagash. Yeah, I'm a big Allagash guy. This isn't the season for Allagash, in my opinion. Now it's like Allagash is like when Blue Moon's hitting its peak. That's when you get some Allagash.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, listen, with this Patriots season, I wasn't drinking much beer. It was hard liquor, brother. When you watch this Patriots team, this is not a beer drinking team. This is, you got to take shots to the face just to deal with it. You got to see double and triple to deal with it. Maybe this upcoming season with Vrabel and McDaniels and all these guys, maybe we can get back to drinking the brewski wooskies. Now, Scott Zolak talked about how McDaniels will shape his offense to fit Drake Maye. And that kind of goes against, I'm sure you've seen it and heard it on Twitter and other places where it's sort of this narrative out there where it's like, well, will McDaniels' system work with Drake Maye? I've even seen some fools have the nerve to be like, is McDaniels too much of an alpha to deal with Mike Vrabel? Come on. First of all, they're tight. This was a Vrabel hire, as we talked about. Secondly, Vrabel is a large human. He could put Josh McDaniels in a locker, close it, and walk away. Okay, there's no alpha off here. It's Vrabel's team. But Scott Zolak believes that McDaniels will shape his offense around Drake Maye successfully. Let's take a listen.
He's not going to force him. I know this for a fact. He will not force him to run the Brady offense. That was Tom's offense. They took that thing to another level. If Josh feels that Drake is better off, terminology-wise, running a West Coast style offense. Josh will morph to that.
Zoe's right. I mean, listen, Cam Newton, Mac Jones, Matt Castle, obviously Brady. We've seen him work with a multitude of different quarterbacks with a multitude of different skill sets. And to be honest, again, anytime I talk about Drake Maye and Tom Brady in the same breath, I get the heebie-jeebies because I almost cringe hearing the things that are coming out of my mouth. But stay with me here because I'm not saying he's greater. However, I named Brady, Newton, Mac Jones, and Matt Castle. This Drake Maye kid has a piece of each one of those dudes. I mean, I think Josh McDaniels can really unleash the potential and the abilities of this kid like nobody's business. I think it's going to work out just fine, brother.
No, I agree. And, like you talked about kind of what's the kid say? Like, you're in your bag or he's in his bag.
Yep.
I mean, Josh McDaniels has a bag of versatility when it comes to, adapting different offenses. I mean, you talk about the spread team with Welker, with Randy Moss. You talk about the two tight ends with Rob Gronkowski and the other tight end there was. You talk about a hurry up, more of a hurry up team after that. Then you talk about the run heavy team when it was Sony Michel run behind a fullback and, en route to Super Bowl in 2018. So it's just, and, then you talk about, McDaniels when it comes to the Cam Newton stuff and, leveraging Mac Jones. Mac Jones' biggest strength coming out of school was his ability to kind of, process and diagnose defenses, right? And McDaniels was essentially allowed him that, gave him that at the line. So I think when it comes to it, like, there is a lot of versatility when it comes to McDaniels, and I can't help. I agree. I don't think this offense is going to look like, Tom Brady's offense. It's a wildly different quarterback who has a wildly different skill set. So I just think there's so much to it, and I do think McDaniels is maybe the most accomplished at this point. Again, I mentioned this earlier when it came to developing a quarterback. How there was no one better, but there might not be anyone better when it comes to, having a resume of, offensive, adaptiveness and, versatility. And, that was one of the things that really stood out to Mike Vrabel. And, it was when I talked to Mike Vrabel after his introductory press conference, I kind of asked him, what are some of the traits that you're looking for in an offensive play caller? And he said, that adaptability and, having versatility and, with your offensive schemes. And I just think McDaniels makes a ton of sense when it comes to that.
If you're enjoying the show, be sure to check out today's episode of Nesson's Daily Sports Podcast. Boston has entered the chat. We cover all things Boston sports as well as trending sports topics from around the country. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Twitch, and wherever else you get your podcast. All right, S-Mizzle, let's talk about the Final Four now. Everybody's talking about the Super Bowl. I get it. I'm excited for Kendrick Lamar at halftime. But as you sort of look at the Final Four teams, NFC and AFC title games, can the Patriots steal anything? Can they sort of look at the blueprint for how these teams are built and sort of mirror it? We say all the time, this is a copycat league. Okay, well, let's copy the hell out of the winners. The Patriots have a high, top 5 draft pick at number 4. They have a ton of money. They have their quarterback for the future, we think, franchise guy. You got a coach that's well respected. You should be able to build this thing the right way. Commanders, built from the ground up. Changed ownership, right? Got a coach in there with a clue. Drafted the right rookie quarterback, and things got to humming very quickly. How about the Bills? Josh Allen's from outer space. They've built around him a little more physical. We've seen a multitude of Bills teams. I mean, we've seen a finesse, high-scoring team. Now they're much more smash-mouth, but it all starts with number 17. The Chiefs, what can you say? Mahomes is great, of course, but they were great before he got there. They just weren't winning Super Bowls. It's Andy Reid's system. That feels like a systemic Andy Reid thing. And then the Eagles, maybe the best out of them all in terms of how they built. Drafting, free agency, trades. It kind of came all together, and they just don't have any weaknesses that we can see. which one of these teams would you sort of copy, or would you take a piece from all of them? How would you sort of, in a copycat league, how would you look at these Final Four teams if you're the Patriots and build yourself?
I just think the thing that is like the most sticks out to me the most is just when it comes to Philly, and it's just how, and you just mentioned it, how they've built themselves. They are a tough team up front. They're a tough team in the trenches, and it's interesting because like when you look at it, a lot of their offensive linemen they're high picks, right? I mean, Lane Johnson was a first rounder a decade ago. Then you go to Landon Dickerson was a second rounder in 2021. Cam Jurgens, who's a center, was a second rounder in 2022. Mekhi Becton, who's their right guard, he was a first rounder in 2020. But it's different because he was drafted because he was talented in that spot. He was drafted in that spot because he was talented. But Philly signed him as a free agent. Philly didn't. They didn't draft him in there. They signed him as a free agent this last year after he got out of the Jets. And then you look at Jordan Mailata, the left tackle. He is a 7th round pick in 2018. So you're talking. I mean, not only are they identifying talented offensive linemen in early rounds and spending picks on them, which is another huge aspect of this. Like you have to draft those guys in those spots. You have to spend in those spots, and so not only are they identifying those players, at the top of the draft board, first rounders, second rounders, that sort of thing, but then they're finding a left tackle in the 7th round. I mean, that is, talk about identifying talent and developing talent for sure. I mean, there's something to say about that. And we're talking about an offensive line in Philly that they just lost. Like, what was he, a multi-time All-Pro, multi-time Pro Bowler when it comes to Jason Kelce? I mean, he was an unbelievable player for a decade, and they just replace him with a 2022 second rounder because they drafted that guy knowing that, hey, we have our center, our franchise center, who's been a rock for us for a decade. He's nearing the end, so we need to draft someone behind him before he's gone. And then this guy can, Cam Jurgens can learn a little bit behind him, that sort of thing. So I just think the way that Philly has addressed and built up their offensive line, again, high picks. So you need to make those selections in those spots, and you need to identify talent both high in the draft and in free agency or later in the draft. So I just think the way Philly has addressed their offensive line is really like the most glaring thing from a Patriots perspective that, you need to take something from this, and you guys can learn from this.
I think that's well said. The Eagles too, you speak about those draft picks. If you look up and down that roster, I mean, it is a ton of big school, big stage, big brand guys who played in big games. They're not taking – these late-round picks are not from William and Mary, okay? They're from real big-name brands, and they came in there ready to play. Big-time conferences, SEC, Big Ten, all the teams we just watched in the playoffs win games. That's who the Eagles are taking even late, in this draft. So I think that's a good point by you. I'm going to go Commanders because the Commanders, if you think about it, they nailed the things. Now, big picture, long term, you're probably right with the Eagles, but short term, I like what the Commanders did, microwave style.
Yep.
I mean, you got the quarterback and the head coach right, and oh, by the way, you get a creative-minded offensive coordinator in Cliff Kingsbury. You have that here in Josh McDaniels. You certainly hope Drake Maye and Mike Vrabel are the right QB and head coach combination. Another thing the Commanders did, Sean, they replaced 11 out of 13 starters on their roster from last season to this season. So it's almost like a total overhaul, which we know damn well the Patriots are going to need. So I'll stay right in the NFC East with you. You like the Eagles. Who the hell can't? But that may be big picture for me. That might be, let's keep building towards that. You're going to need some drafts to equal that. I think the Commanders in the short term, and again, that's why I make that Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels comparison, right? They're very similar. I think the Patriots could sort of be next season's Commanders from this season. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think, to your point, I like the term microwave style. Like, rebuilds don't have to be 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Like, rebuilds can be, I don't know if you want to call it overnight. It certainly was in Washington. I don't know if the New England will get that lucky again, but if it's not overnight, it can be in a year. It can be in, I should say 2 years or 3 years. It doesn't have to be like this 7 or 8 year rebuild. And I just think, if you hit on the right spots, if you bring in the right guys, if you identify the right talent that fits with the coaching and, fits with the build of the team and the makeup of the team. I mean, they got, Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu. Then you go to Zach Ertz. I mean, they brought in veterans that are like legit playmakers, productive playmakers at really key spots who fit what they were looking for. So I definitely agree. I mean, Washington was in a really good spot because and they have a good GM that's running the show there. But they were in a really good spot because I identified talent, and not only talent, but talent that made sense for their roster.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the teams in the playoffs. Commanders, we mentioned. The Texans turned it around overnight. It felt like, obviously, with C.J. Stroud and DeMeco Ryans, that combo I speak of. The Broncos in a post-Russell Wilson era with Bo Nix. Boom, just like that. Yep. Bo Nix, Sean Payton, they were able to sort of make some shrewd moves to complement them. And next thing you know, they're in the playoffs. So it can be done. I don't think we have to wait too long. And in the AFC East, outside of the Bills, I think it's wide open. Not far-fetched at all to think this Patriots team could be vying for a wild card next season. At least wishful thinking. That's what we hope. Hey, S-Mizzle, man, I love doing this with you, man. Whether it's me, you, and George, or just me and you, it doesn't matter, brother. You've just been on fire. I tell you that every time I see you. You've been on a hell of a run, my man, and I appreciate doing this with you, and I appreciate all of you for rolling with us here on Foxborough Rush. For S. Measy, Sean McGuire, and T. Teasy, Travis Thomas. We'll see you next time on Foxborough Rush. Peace.